So my name is Jena, and I got interested in genealogy because my father was looking to, he travels to Italy once a year, my parents do, and he was thinking it might be easier to travel back and forth if they had some sort of Italian citizenship. Maybe my ancestors didn't give it up and all that. So we've been doing it sort of amateur for a long time. And then when the AncestryDNA stuff came out, I thought, well, wouldn't that be interesting? Because I know I'm a mutt. I'm like the total American melting pot. I've got the Irish and the Scottish and the Italian and the Ukrainian. And I vaguely remember one of my father's sister-in-laws saying something about German once upon a time, but okay. And so I started digging, and I found all sorts of things, and I had built up the tree. And I did the DNA, 2 years ago, I think? Yes. 2 years ago. And everything looked pretty much as I expected until some newer stuff started rolling in. So I started seeing this last name sort of along the way that didn't look familiar, but I knew that my father's mother's father might have been German, so maybe that's where, but the connection was closer. I kept seeing this last name popping up, so I clicked on it, and then I found that my aunt, my father's sister, had done her tree as well, and she had some different information than I did. So I had always assumed that my grandmother's father was a gentleman named Frank Bean, lived here in Lowell, and that he was her father, her sister's father, and her other sister's father. Well, so this is what we thought it looked like. There's my grandmother. And they adopted a brother at one point in time, and this is her second husband after Frank passed away. However, this is what it actually looks like. Whoops. It turns out that my great-grandmother was probably already pregnant when she came here to Lowell in 1935, and so I did some digging on this gentleman who apparently is my biological great-grandfather, and his name's Lewis, and he was in Garwood, New Jersey, which is where I knew my great-grandmother was from, and his address was not far from where I knew she grew up, and so that turns out this is the actual tree. We've got my grandmother and her father somewhere in New Jersey. The man I thought was my great-grandfather is my Aunt Carol's father. And then it turns out that while my great-grandfather Frank was away in the war, my great-grandmother and her own father-in-law had a child, my Aunt Rita. So a little more complicated. And then another layer to that I just found out is when I started talking to this Cliche family, I found out that this gentleman, Lewis, who was apparently my biological great-grandfather, had, I think it was 16 different children with at least 4 different women. So in his family, it's well known that there are many other family members floating around out there, but we didn't know that up here. So it's exciting and interesting, and turns out that German was actually a little more direct than I thought. So here's the 2 trees. Whereas Dave did his.
Yes,
and
I was hoping for a little bit of interest. My family came here in the early 1900s. Both sides of my family are predominantly Italian, and when we did the DNA, I looked and it traced me back directly to the village that we all knew the family comes from, and most of the family still is, with the exception of my maternal grandmother, who's Polish, and it comes directly from Poland.
Yep.
So no surprises, nothing out of the ordinary whatsoever. No stories. It just turned out that it's exactly as the family predicted.
So are you both glad that you did the DNA testing?
I am. I think data and information is interesting.
I agree.
I'll look into this a little more. Not everyone in my family likes it. That's okay. They don't have to. That's fine. They don't have to. I'll let them take in the information if they want to or not. But I think it's fascinating. I like history. I like local history. I like personalizing history. It's like why I love living where we do, because it's very local to us. Everything's here. And so, it's kind of my own little story. So I think it's fascinating.
Would you recommend that other people do it?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Unless you don't want to know. Because if you don't want to know, you're going to find out. If once you upload it, it's out there. And you may be contacted by people whom you're related to, like that cousin from this guy that I contacted and said, hey, guess what? And there's more mysteries to solve, but it also could help settle other people's questions about their families, so why not?